just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. This is Friday Jobber on the 7th of December 2018, beaming from WBRM Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We remember the Pearl Harbor attack, which was on on December the 7th. That basically was the entry point, put a new term there, to the great Patriotic War, World War II, which molded the greatest generation. We just buried one of those in George H.W. Bush in Houston, Texas on Thursday. We're on Friday now. All right, starting off here. Anyway, nonetheless, we'll look at some of the prominent conservative in Tucker Carlson. I can recall when old Tucker Carlson was on PBS, public television. At that time, it was under the auspices of a right-wing leadership, and he was there. Now he's at Fox News, and what we have is an interview with him. With at Dishvich Hanshon Hashi. Anyway, Dishwich Vanji. It's a German publication, you can tell there. Nonetheless, he is on, what night is he on? Weeknights on Fox News. His schedule, according to this, is tightly managed. There, every minute is tightly planned in Tucker Carlson's studio. He's a breakout cable news star of the year in U.S. media. 2.7 million touring on Fox every night to watch the peppered tribute of the forgotten man. His new book is A Ship of Fools that has vaulted to number one on the New York Times bestsellers list, unseating none other than Bob Woodward's Fear after 4 weeks in the top spot. Carlson spins fast lips in the office, talks to his ear. Hey, no, it's totally fine. I totally get. Well, anyway. Clean this up to F off there, I suppose. From his mouth spills a torrent of profanities. His face expressions change like the clouds in a gust storm. What not? Stop, he shouts. I'm not a wimpy victim. Carlson's past month off the air have been turbulent, and the anti-fascist goons besiege his Washington home. His wife, Susie, was alone inside when the mob pounded on the front door and shouted, "Tucker, we know where you sleep at night." Terrified, Susie barricaded herself in the pantry, called the police for help. Holy yes, man, Carlson yelled into the phone. Sorry, somebody just left a huge Swiss chocolate bar on my desk. That's what I need. Anyway, Carlson has a Swiss great-grandfather, Cicero Lombardi. One of Carlson's children went to school in Switzerland as a teenager. Tucker himself had a brief stint at a Swiss elite college in Loch Lomond. I got kicked out, he said. Anyway, nonetheless, he takes his seat at his desk. Behind him is a panoramic view of the Capitol. The phone still to his ear. He instructs the caller, we'll win if we are honest and positive. We'll lose if we are defensive and anxious. I'm sitting now for an interview with a Swiss journalist. The Swiss is very interesting here. The population, some actually speak French, and some speak German. So this is a German publication here. Anyway, besides the neo-Nazis invading his house, his tone is calm. He takes a seat at his desk. Behind him is, we did panoramic view. Sorry about that. He returns to his call. Yes, definitely, I'm going to Switzerland soon. You should come, etc. And one reason I love Switzerland is the cheese, which I think is better. I like the alpine environment. I guess you can fly off a mountain top. Anyway, the Swiss are very suspicious of anyone who is boastful, and why I have a question about Trump. That's very interesting. I had an opportunity to represent a Swiss national a few days ago in a very simple little civil case, and that is indeed the situation. We use an interpreter. In your book, you speak lots about people who attack Trump, but you actually don't say very much about Trump's record. That's true, or do you think he has kept his promises? Has he achieved his goals? No, he hasn't. No, his chief promises were he would build a wall, defund Planned Parenthood, and repeal Obamacare. He hasn't done any of those things. There's a lot of reasons for that, but since I finished writing the book, I've come to believe, that Trump's role is not as a conventional president who promises to get certain things achieved to the Congress and then does. I think he is. I don't think he's capable. I don't think he is capable of a substantive focus. I don't think he understands the system. I don't think the Congress is on his side. I don't think his own agencies support him, and I'm not going to do that. I think Trump's role is to begin the conversation of words like a team leader, about what actually matters, and we are not having any conversation about immigration before Trump arrived in Washington. People are bothered about it in different places in the country. It is a huge country, but that's not a staple of political debate at all. Trump asks basic questions like, why don't our borders work? Why don't we sign a trade agreement and let others cheat? My favorite of all is what the point of NATO. The point of NATO was to keep the Soviets from invading Western Europe, but they haven't existed in 27 years. So, what is the point? There are obvious questions that no one could answer. Apart from asking these very important questions, he has really achieved nothing. Not much, much less he should have. I come to believe he's not capable of it. Why should he not be capable? This is a Swiss interviewer. Because the legislative process in this country by design is highly complex. It's designed to be complex as a way of diffusing power. And of course, because people who framed the Constitution found in our country were worried about concentrations of power. They balanced it amongst three branches, as you know. They made it very hard to make legislation. In order to do so, you really have to understand how it works, and you have to be very focused on getting it done. In other words, compromise. Listen to the lobbyists. He knows very little about the legislative process and hasn't learned anything, and he surrounds himself with people that could get it done and haven't done all the things that you need to do so. It's mostly his fault that he hasn't achieved those things. I'm not in charge of Trump. The title of the book, Ship of Fools, you've written that an irresponsible elite has taken over America. Who is the biggest fool? I mean, let me just be clear. I'm not against an aristocratic system. I'm not against the ruling class. And this is something that is mentioned by many, lamented, I should say, by many conservatives. Even some of the more right-wing militia-type groups say that they're in favor of capitalism. I think the system we have now the meritocracy, which is based really on our education system, and a small number of college could have produced a ruling class that doesn't have the self-awareness that you need to be wise. I'm not arguing for populism. Actually, I'm arguing against populism. Populism is what you get when your leaders fail. In a democracy, the population says this is terrible, and they elect someone like Trump. Well, that situation is very interesting, what the populism is. In Western countries, the so-called populism is the type of thing that has arose, in Hitler's Germany on the Schickengruber. That started, of course, he started out actually as a National Socialist, a little different situation. But you have many of these populists. We have in Brazil now, this character there is a populist, but he's a right-wing populist. And the argument we make at the mic here that it's very conducive in the U.S. to come up with these right-wing populists. Because what happens is it's here the issue of jobs. That was Trump's biggest item to get elected. And the border is a very interesting situation. Later we'll have an article by an immigrant who worked in one of Trump's hotels that has spoken out. It was in the Washington Post and in various other publications. But this is what it takes, the whole immigration problem. An E-Verifier, they couldn't find Trump's hotel in the E-Verifier regime. Now, when you look at immigration, what Trump was focusing on
the border, a racist approach, obviously, because the people that come across the border are people of color. Easy to do that. But most of the people that come into the U.S. come in by aeroplane, period. Come on various kinds of visas, from tourist visas, etc., student visas, you name it, and just literally stay, period. Those are the ones that appear, and there's another category, various categories. There's some that come on entrepreneurial visas. There are others that come in as so-called tech workers, and they occupy spaces here, and various other types that come in, and they're operating under the old set of immigration laws, which were meant to populate the country. This is European population. So in other words, once you arrived here, you could bring your relatives, your grandmother, your aunt, etc., across the board. And still that is happening. But according to Trump's dictates and the general thinking of his constituency, the people of color are not the ones that they designate to come in. So in other words, we hear terms like anchor babies, etc., and that is part of it. We'll go to our presentation from the San Diego Tribune. We always look in on the so-called caravans and see where they are. Let me be quickly back to this. Didn't intend to deviate over here, but elites, you hear in political science, you hear lots about elites, the world of affluence and of a high level of education amongst. I grew up in the town of in La Jolla, in Southern California. It's a very affluent town, and then I moved as a kid to Georgetown in Washington, another affluent area. I have always lived around people who were welding authority and the ruling class. It's only after the financial crisis of 2008 that I noticed that something was really out of whack, because Washington didn't really feel the crisis. If you leave Washington and drive to, say, Pittsburgh, which is a manufacturing town, well, they felt the crisis way before the Depression. 3.5 hours to the west, you drive through a series of little towns that are devastated. There are no car dealerships. There are no restaurants. There's nothing. They have not recovered. I remember driving out there one day, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, thinking, boy, this is a disaster, rural America. Well, rural America is out there 8 or 9 years ago, and I thought you'd be running the country. You should have a sense that I remember thinking to myself, nobody knows I've known has any idea what's happening out here. Well, they don't care either. Massive inequality doesn't work in a democracy. You become Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is a totally different situation. Venezuela is a socialist country, and many of the problems, not all, but most of the problems Venezuela has is because of the U.S. and the reactionary forces in Venezuela that have sabotaged the economy. Sanctions by the U.S., various other things have caused the problems there, and people have fled. If you make it above a certain income, or if you live in a neighborhood, you have zero physical contact with the other. America, no doubt about that. The elites in our country is physically separated, and you'll hear this come about, but in actuality, people that live in suburbia, depending obviously on the socioeconomic status of some of the extraburbs, don't have any contact with these with the quote-unquote working classes, period. You don't have to go to the elites. The elites are, depending on how he's defining his elites, people hang around La Jolla. Well, if you hang around La Jolla, when you go to downtown Los Angeles, unless you have an office there, and then you will see the homeless, but you will not see them. Well, this is a remarkable thing. For 100 years, the Democratic Party represented wage earners, working people, normal people, middle-class people, then some somewhere around in precisely pegged to the Clinton term, the tech boom in the Bay Area, in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. The Democrats reorganized and became the party of technology, of large corporations, and the rich. You really see their change in the 20 years where the top 10 richest zip codes in the U.S., 9 of them in the last election just went for the Democrats. Well, yes, because these people, even if they have libertarian views, are or even fiscal conservatives, are not nuts, period. The Democratic Party, which for 100 years was a party of the average person, is now the party of the rich. Well, the argument there is, if you look at the socioeconomic status, and you can go to various polls, etc., of the Republican Party, the core of it is the same basic group of people, a mirror image of them, a little bit different there. Now, obviously, the rank and file types in West Virginia and places like that voted for Trump in the thousands are of this quote-unquote working class strata. But that is not the Republican Party. The Republican Party is basically a party of middle-class people, mostly upper-middle-class people, and they represent the interests of millionaires and billionaires. Trump is often seen as a world-changing figure, is actually a symptom of something that preceded him that I sometimes wonder if even he understands, which is the realignment. He serves the purpose of bringing the middle class into the Republican Party, which has zero interest to no interest in representing them at all, Trump's initiatives. He felt he could smell that there were large groups of voters who had no one representing them, and he brought them into the Republican side, but the realignment is still going on. Yes, it is indeed. In other words, the Democratic Party used to represent the middle class. It no longer does. It now hates the middle class. That's an absolute lie. The Republican Party, which has never represented the middle class and doesn't want to. Now, what he's doing is here, he is interchanging the term middle class to the working class. And I guess a commentary here is several ways of obtaining membership in quote-unquote the middle class. You can do it by your economic status, your education status, or your general way of life. We'll say shopping at places like Whole Foods, etc., etc. That is a so-called, at least thought to be a middle-class lifestyle. And I think going forward, the Republican Party will wake up and realize they're our voters, and we're going to represent them whether we want to or not. Well, that's just wishful thinking there. You're writing in an almost nostalgic tone about the old liberals, people like Miss Raymond, your first class teacher. You described her wonderfully in the book. You say that they have vanished. What happened? I find myself in deep sympathy with a lot of the aims of the 70s liberals. I believe in free speech and instinctively side with the individual against the group. I think that the individual matters. I am deeply suspicious of foreign adventurism, voluntary wars, wars of self-defense are not conventional. I am, for them, completely there is an invasion repellent. The idea you want to send 100,000 troops to a country to improve the political system is grotesque to me. It hasn't been. They call this nation building, incidentally. The Vietnam War was horrifying to them because it was a voluntary war waged for theatrical reasons, geographical strategic reasons, which they rejected, and I do too. Well, I think he's like 49. Anyway, they were also suspicious of market capitalism. They thought somebody needed to push back against the forces of the market. The forces of the market are running willy-nilly now in the form of Facebook and Google and various others. In other words, they're doing more advertising now than they've done in the history of advertising. We don't have to follow it blindly. We can make autonomous choices about how we respond to market forces. People get crushed beneath its wheels. Capitalism drives change, innovation. Capitalism in itself only drives change because it must change. As far as innovation, it stifles much of the innovation of people. The old ways gave way to the new ways of doing things, and in the process of change, the weak get hurt. Always, this was true in the industrialization 100 years ago. It's true in the digital revolution now. And let me just move on here. This is a fairly long interview, and I'm getting... Well, you absolutely right. In your book, you say they vanished, but they seem to come back again. You're absolutely right. You are inclusive, correct to say that the last time we saw this was 100 years ago, which was another pivotal point in our economic and social history. Well, Marx wrote much about this, where after 1,000 years of living in agricultural agrarian societies, people moved to the cities to work in factories. That upended the social order completely, and that came to a huge political change and massive reaction. The U.S. and Western Europe, labor unions moderated the force of change and allowed us to preserve capitalism in the form that we see it now. You are seeing the exact same dynamic play out today. We have another, as I say, economic revolution. The digital age is changing how people work and how they make money and how families are structured. This is a huge reaction, of course, because there's always is, because normal people can't handle change at this pace. People once again are crying out for some help. They feel threatened by change. What bothers me is that there is no large group of sensible people asking how we buffer this change. How can we restrain it enough not to stop it? Talking about radicals, recently a radical left-wing group has threatened to storm your Washington house. How did your wife and your family? They are fine, and they are pretty tough. There was also a right-wing group that stormed his house. Your attackers had a go. They are trying to silence you, of course. I would never, of course, have a cornerstone of Western civilization is expressive and freedom of conscience. You can tell me how to behave. You can force me not to sleep or take my clothes off in public. That's fine. Every society has a right to control behavior. This is Tucker Carlson talking. No one has a right to control what you believe. No one can control my conscience. That is mine alone. Only totalitarian movements that do that, and well, there are national laws called the Patriot Act, period. How do you prepare for your shows? And how do you prepare to be so tough? Well, I just know what I think, and I actually read a lot about whatever topic the topic is. I write the scripts. Interesting. You do all that yourself? We have a writer, but the opening long strip I write myself. I like best like 1,000 words. So by the time you finish writing 1,000 words, your mind is limbered up. I suppose it is. Absolutely, it is true that your mic is turned up higher than the one of your guests. No, somebody said that really. It's not unusual. A lot of right-wing shows, our mic's not turned up, but a lot of right-wing shows, if you notice, the volume is up. And I've also saw that on liberal shows also, where the person is shouting. Anyway, he doesn't say he did a good job, and what does he say? No, not regularly. I've heard from him before, and I'm enthusiastically not a policy advisor to him or anyone else. My job is just to say what I think is true. Now, he's referring to DJ Trump. Let me finish this up. This went on. I thought that it was mentioned in the Washington Post that I'd actually go into the interview. Okay. How close to the revolution is this country? Yeah, that's interesting here. By revolution, let me make it clear. I think that we are somewhere near an outbreak of a civil war, armed violence between two sides for a bunch of different reasons. Testosterone levels are low and marijuana usage is high. That I think the population is probably two. What you don't have is a prerequisite fall revolution. Violent revolution is a large group of young people who are comfortable with violence and don't have. We don't have that. Maybe that will change. I hope it doesn't. I hope. I don't. Excuse me. I don't want violence for violence. I've heard that term before. Violence for violence' sake. If you look at the polling on the subject matter, classical, traditional America has antique racial attitudes. If you say, would you be okay with your daughter marrying outside her race? Most Americans, if they are being honest, would say, no, I'm not okay. I'm not for that. Now, the polling shows people are much more comfortable with marrying somebody of a different race than they are marrying someone of a different political persuasion. I would rather my daughter marry someone who is Latino rather than liberal, or someone might say, what is the measure? There are many measures, but one measure of how politically divided we are, and I just think that is over time people will self-segregate. It is a continental country. It is a very big piece of land, and you see where certain states have just become very different. Like if you're a conservative, you are more likely going to live in California in 10 years. Probably not. Orange County is a purely Democratic. Not exactly right. You are going to move if you are very liberal, or are you really going to move to live in Idaho? Probably not. The revolution you were warning about, this is from the interviewer. What needs to be done stopping happening? Just the only thing you can do in a democracy which is to address the legitimate concerns of the population and think more critically. You hear that word pop up. And be more wise in your decision making. Get a handle on technology. Technology is a driver of change. So sweep away the politics. Impossible. Fundamental facts about people is they can't metabolize change at the pace because it's an evolutionary matter. They are not designed to. They are not. If you ask the average person who what's the most upsetting thing about getting old, you expect to say, well, my friends are dead. But that's not what they say. Or that I have to go to the bathroom 6 times a night. Oh, well. That's not what they say. You know that they say things are too different. This is not the country I grew up in. I don't recognize it. All people hate that. There have been books written on this, and we've reviewed them here. It doesn't mean you're a bigot. It just means you're human, unless you want change to fall apart, because it's so volatile, that you can't have a working economy. You need to get a handle on things. How important is migration in terms of change? It's central because nothing changes society more quickly and more permanently than bringing in a whole new population and not attacking on anybody. There are a lot of populations. There are a lot of immigrants who are much more impressive than I am. I have no doubt about that. I'm not attacking immigrants. Excuse me. I'm merely saying that the effects of people who are already here is real, and they are not bigots for feeling otherwise. Let me just zip on down here. Do you think Europe is getting able to get in control of that? We have 28 countries in the EU, and of course Switzerland's not a member. So smart, so smart. You know why? Because they are mountain people, and they love it. Do you think that Europe will get in control of immigration? The EU has been doomed since the first day because of its inconsistency with human nature. Oh boy. The reason we have nation states is because people want them. It's organic. A nation state is just a large tribe and is organized along lines that make sense. They evolve over thousands of years, and to ignore that and destroy it is because you think you have a better idea. It's so insane. And I often talk to Carlson, who seems to be very passive about Switzerland and a ski around the Alps soon. Perhaps of a smoke on one of the outdoor saunas. I will tell him smells like rotten eggs. Anyway, this was the interviewer talking. Here's a very long interview, an interesting interview in terms of the dynamics of so-called nations. Well, a nation's homogeneous? No, hell no. People have drifted in for thousands of years across so-called Asia, and these are just distinctions that have been imposed there. In the U.S., yes, immigrant populations have arrived, and they tend to have more children than indigenous populations. This is one reason you had the conservatives talk about abortions, birth control, that sort of thing. They wanted to up the population, the numbers in the population. We saw this during the Carter administration. But the problem is in the U.S., you can only afford 2 children. You can't afford 6, or you would need 2 or 3 jobs, or a very, very good job like a Willard Romney. This will do it for this part of it. Let me just check my time here. It takes, all right, we're doing all right. Well, let me move on here to quickly the crystal ball. Governors in 2019-2020, Democrats are trying to hold the line in red state battles. This is by Kyle Klondike. As usual, he's the managing editor there. Following the 2018 election, the Republicans now control 27 governorships to 23 for the Democrats. But a majority of American publics, of course, living in states like California that have Democratic governors. Democrats netted 7 more governorships in Illinois, which they should have never lost. They finally got rid of that nut in Maine and in Kansas, in Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, and Wisconsin. Boss Walker bit the dust. So Democrats now hold 23 governorships while they're 27. And if we look over the map here out west from Washington State to California, Nevada, and Oregon, they're Democrats, and in Montana, and Colorado, and New Mexico, and Kansas. And if you looked at Idaho, Wisconsin, Wyoming, North, South Dakota, Nebraska, all these are small states, Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma, and Texas being the largest. And then you go from Iowa down to Missouri to Arkansas. Louisiana is still blue here, and you go to Indiana, Ohio, needs reorganizing, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida remain there. And crooked elections in South Carolina. But we have North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, New York. And who do we have here? The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, unfortunately, is red, shouldn't be red, and Maine. So, in other words, things have changed quite a bit here. The 10 most populous states, we talked about that. North Carolina elected its governor there in North Carolina. The crystal ball ratings here, well, very, very few states that are up for election. Most of them are not having elections. And they have only Montana that I see here as a toss-up. And Missouri as red. In West Virginia, well, West Virginia, we get the governors. News releases there all the time. He used to be a Democrat, turned a Republican. Mississippi, 2019. What do we got for it? Leans Republican. Yeah, you could say that. In Vermont. Well. John Bell Edwards in Louisiana is running for a second term. It's a very quick term there. See where that goes in Louisiana. They have so-called jungle primary down there. Blevin has sported weak approval numbers. That's according to the Morning Consult survey. They're pegging him at 30% approval and 55% disapproval. Hadn't saw that before. The Attorney General, Mr. Bashir, he's the son, of course, the former governor. Excuse me. Steve Bashir, a good man. And other possible candidates there, I'm not familiar with them at all. Amy McGurk, she's a Democrat, a retired Marine pilot who narrowly lost a close congressional district there. Andy Barr also there, the state of Kentucky. We do a lot of work in Kentucky politically. We watch the polls there. Some of our friends down in Kentucky there. Particularly their Secretary of State there in Kentucky. Steve Bullock, that's out in Montana. He is term limited. John Tester just won re-election in Montana. Montana is a very interesting state. We'll see what happens in Montana. So much for the crystal ball here, and we'll save some of this for the next time around. Let's just jump very quickly to our lineup here. We had the woman that worked at the Trump Hotel. We'll bring that in tomorrow night. I don't have time now here. Excuse me. And some more of this. We will do the crime bill. Old man McConnell here is sitting on the crime bill. Says he won't bring it up. It is bipartisan support. Ooh. And even DJ Trump will probably support, despite pressure from the president. Old man McConnell told Washington White House officials and others close to him that a vote is unlikely on the floor in the lame duck there. And from a Republican named Doug Deason. Anyway, he doesn't like the bill. That's what said some of the measures there, referring to old Beauregard Sessions there. The white official said he doesn't want to vote unless the overwhelming majority of Republicans vote with it. And Charles Grassley said this week that 28 of the 30 Republican senators support the bill. There are 51 Republican senators, nearly all of the 49 Democrats, if not all, support this bipartisan bill. McConnell just basically wants to lock everyone up. Lawmakers to try to take up a farm bill extension they've been working on. Incidentally, they also took up a 2-week extension to the debt. And let's see what else has happened here. Reluctant. McConnell is digging his feet in recent days. Kirshner ramped up his private push amongst senators, visiting Republican lunches. Anyway, Fox News Corp took a rare step of endorsing the bill in its first news release by the former member Hope Hicks. Fox supports bipartisan first step to limit mandatory minimal sentences. And this is something that's been talked about by many people in both the Senate and in the House. The senator out of Wisconsin, I'm not sure if he's retired or not, now used to support that bill. Kevin Hart stepped down as host. This is Variety here. The Oscars, evidently he made some remarks about LGBT community, and he was asked to, as they say, leave the building. Anyway, let's get in the scores of the National Basketball League. Oops, we need to get the right night going here. The Knickerbockers were in Boston. Celtics 128-100. The Suns were out in Oregon. The Trailblazers won 108-86. And finally, the Rockets of Houston were at the Jazz. Jazz 118-91. And I just looked over in college. We don't have anything going on there. The National Hockey League. Let me just stop this. The Red Wings and Maple Leafs. Red Wings in an overtime 5-4. The Avalanche and Panthers. Avalanche 6-2. The Blue Jackets and Flyers. The Flyers flew by. This is an overtime. Well, the Flyers didn't fly by. Sorry about that. 4-3 Blue Jackets. The Islanders and one of our favorite teams since university days. The Penguins of Pittsburgh 6-2 over the Islanders. The Canadiens and the Senators. Canadiens 6-2. The Bruins and Lightning. Lightning struck. The Bruins didn't. 3-2 is the final. Lightning. The Wild and the Flames. It was the Flames 2-0. The Capitals and Coyotes. It was the Capitals 4-2. The Predators and Canucks. Canucks 6-3. The Blackhawks and Golden Knights. Golden Knights 4-3. The Devils and the Kings. The Devils deviled the Kings. 6-3 was the final score there. We'll have more on the week that was. That will be tomorrow night. It's always usually on Saturday night, sometimes not. I'm not certain what we'll have for Sunday programming. One of the things we've been working on here is the Republicans taking extraordinary steps in these lame duck sessions in Wisconsin and in Michigan to deprive elected officials of absolute voter suppression that happen to be Democrats of doing their duties as governors. We'll put that into a special one, a special show. Now, I'm not certain when we'll do that particular show. And we'll have our financial production, which is This Week in Economics by Numbers Man and Cranston Analytics. That will be over the weekend. The open source report, we will get it out. And we've been working on it for a while now, and it's unfortunate because this is December and Pearl Harbor Day, and we've been just recalcitrant about not getting that out. We need to, before the end of the year, at least get 2 productions in, and perhaps something on the old year and preview the new year. A lot of shorthand going on here all at one time. Incidentally, the Cubs have a slower budget. We didn't bring that out, but they're looking. The Cardinals, which is a strong central in the National League, is very strong. They got Mr. Goldsmith from Arizona. So now they have some power. You have, of course, Milwaukee there, which would have won it all. But as one would say, they came up short. Anyway, this will do it for us on the 7th of December, Pearl Harbor Day, 2018.